This is Bengals Central Podcast, keeping you up to date on all the Bengals news. Brought to you by ProFootballCentral.com. And now, here are your hosts, Sean O'Donnell and Chris Rowling.
Welcome to the Bengals Central Podcast, found exclusively on the Pro Football Central Radio Network and brought to you by Onnit Labs at Onnit.com and Big Frog Custom T-shirts at BigFrog.com/Cincinnati. I'm your host, Sean O'Donnell, and with me as always, my co-host, Chris Rowling. Chris, the third preseason game, otherwise known as the regular season dress rehearsal, is now in the books. And we also have another episode of Hard Knocks to discuss today.
You summed it up about right, Sean. We'll be reviewing the game against the Dallas Cowboys, as well as preview and final game of the preseason against the Indianapolis Colts. To help us do that, we'll be speaking with Colts Central Radio's host, Tyler Brooke, so be sure to stay tuned. But first, we'll kick things off by talking a little bit about Tuesday's episode of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, Chris, once again, Hard Knocks delivered this past Tuesday. I mean, I'm all for, is there a ballot that I can sign or something to get these guys an Emmy? Because, this is just amazing, captivating TV that we've been watching. I mean, this is the most thoroughly entertained I've been in front of a television screen in, quite some time. So let's highlight a couple of the, more notable happenings over the course of the Hard Knocks episode. And as always, the Bengals find a little bit of a way to sneak some humor into the episode, and that kind of happened this week in the form of James Harrison. And it's funny putting James Harrison and humor in the same sentence. That those two phrases, they don't seem like they should coexist, but it was kind of funny when we saw Jordan Campbell, the undrafted rookie free agent out of New Mexico State, and J.K. Schaefer, Chris's buddy here. They took a competition between each other and decided that it would be settled via arm wrestling. They were trying to prove who was the stronger guy, and Campbell got the best of Schaefer in that one. But then, I know Chris, being a guy from your alma mater, I know he's a guy that we're both polling for too, J.K. Schaefer. He's been doing pretty well so far. But luckily, his talents on the football field are a little more extensive than his talents on the arm wrestling table, I guess. But James Harrison took it upon himself to be the alpha of the linebackers group, and consequently absolutely just destroyed Jordan Campbell in a linebacker match. Listen to me. And I guess it was a linebacker match, but it was an arm wrestling match. But that was awesome. I love the fact that James Harrison, at 35 years of age, he's joking around with the younger guys, and he's still doing the whole test of strength thing. I mean, we saw his insane acupuncture treatment the week before, and now he's destroying you. I mean, I got to say, James Harrison is a scary man, and we already knew this, but, I mean, just the way that the presence that he brings to this football team, the way that the guys, the players in the locker room kind of react to him and learn from him, I mean, is incredible, I think. So, I mean, I think this is just another one of those cases, it was a great situation. It was fun to watch on Hard Knocks, but kind of, if you read between the lines, it really shows you kind of the subtle leadership qualities that James Harrison brings to the Cincinnati Bengals. Chris, how did you like the arm wrestling match?
Boy, I'll tell you what. James Harrison smelled blood, saw the young pups going at it, and took his place atop the pack. That's the attitude he brings. That's what the locker room needed. And, the one thing I will add about Harrison, because you already elaborated on it so well, Harrison looks huge. He looks bigger to me than in his Pittsburgh days, and he's 35, and he is insane. I mean, you put him next to Geno Atkins, and I'm going to start having issues seeing who's bigger. Harrison looks like a monster, and I'm excited to see him get on the field, and I hope that body holds up, because he is a physical specimen at his age, and it's going to be very interesting to see the impact he has on the field, not just on the locker room. We'll switch gears here, though, and not focus on players for a second, and look at the coaching staff, because a trend we've seen in the past couple of weeks, if you follow guys like me and Sean on Twitter, you follow Joe Reed of the Cincinnati Enquirer, you see a trend of folks lobbying for Mike Zimmer to get a head coaching position after this year. Part of the reason you see that is because Zimmer has a bad reputation of being too direct, cussing too much, and just overall being a negative person. And that's fine. That some coaches survive like that, and Zimmer has more than survived like that with that kind of attitude. That's fine. But once again, in the middle of this episode of Hard Knocks, like we saw 2 weeks ago, Zimmer was very, very reserved and encouraging in meetings with players, was encouraging them, didn't cuss at all, which is, if you've been watching Hard Knocks, you know that is a rarity. We kind of saw a softer side to Mike Zimmer, and I think that's something that this isn't just him putting on a show because he knows there's extra cameras and other coaching staffs in the league are going to see this, blah, 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 blah. We're just seeing another side of Zimmer we've never had an opportunity to see before. This is the true Zimmer, and do I think it will help him get a head coaching job? Absolutely not. I think the play of his units on the field and his more up-tempo attitude on the sidelines is what is still preventing him, along with the league just being more offensive-minded while he's a defensive-minded coach. I don't know if this is going to help him better get a job, but it's really nice to see a more in-depth look at someone who has, before Hard Knocks, been kind of stereotyped as one-dimensional. Sean, your thoughts on the softer side of Mike Zimmer?
Well, Chris, you pretty much nailed it there. But I guess one thing I got to say is, kudos to the NFL Films crew for, showing this side of Zimmer, really, because, like you said, Chris, it's really not something we've been accustomed to seeing. Every time Zimmer is, finding camera time, it usually comes with a string of profanities. So, it was kind of nice to see Zimmer, bring Devin Still into his office and, try to, tell the second-year player, that more is expected of him without, flipping out and dropping F-bombs, throughout the entire conversation. And, this coming after one episode prior in which Adam Jones was, mentioned Zimmer in the same light as, like the father he never had. You really see the respect that these guys have for Zimmer, and now you see Zimmer kind of as a different person, or as you put it, Chris, the softer side of Mike Zimmer. And yeah, I'm with you, Chris. It's probably not going to play any real part in helping him get a head coaching job. But for all of us who are very familiar with Mike Zimmer, I think it just continues to raise the question. I don't think it's if he's going to be a head coach, but when. I mean, the guy is well-deserving, and now we see that he can be very humane when disciplining players as well. And, I think it's only a matter of time until he finds a team that is willing to take a shot with him at the helm. So as we get deeper into Hard Knocks, unfortunately, we have to start dealing with the ups and downs of roster cuts. And we saw more of them this past episode, in which the Bengals, they are down to 75 now, but during the filming of Hard Knocks, they went down to 81 by releasing 6 players. And we got to see how head coach Marvin Lewis spoke to these guys when they called him in. And, it's more of a depressing time watching Hard Knocks. And, we're going to get plenty of that for this next coming episode, which will showcase the cuts down to the final 53. But, we saw the highs and lows of Boyd that they brought in. I'm not going to pronounce his first name. I can't remember. Chris, do you remember Garaney? Do you remember that?
Absolutely not, but he's the only guy with that first name in the country, apparently. So there's
That's right. They did say that. But, yeah, him. That's who we're talking about. Obviously he was elated, after they invited him into camp, tried to prove himself, but then, he became a casualty of the numbers game, and they had to let him go. So in that quick of a time, he saw some light at the end of the tunnel, and then, it was just all hope for kind of dashed for the time being, and probably one of the most intriguing cuts at that time was linebacker Jordan Campbell, undrafted free agent and fan favorite and arm wrestling champ, I guess, in terms of if you're talking to J.K. Schaefer. But, he was kind of a surprising early cut, I guess. I thought we would see him stick around a little bit, but, I think the coaching staff handled it very well, and they took him aside and let him know that, they really do think that he can play in this league. And, they told him straight up that they feel that he can catch on with another team. And, it's interesting seeing how an NFL organization handles roster cuts like these. It's really neat kind of being a fly on the wall, so to speak, and watching how it all goes down. Hard Knocks, NFL Films, they're documenting it with such precision, and, it's great to be able to watch, even though it is an unfortunate circumstance for these players. Chris, what were your thoughts on the roster cuts that we watched during Hard Knocks?
The only other thing I really have to add to that is I'm really impressed with how well all these young kids, and some older, I suppose, how these guys handle this situation, man. I'll use Otis Hudson as an example. Marvin Lewis just pulls him aside as the team's leaving the practice field and says, hey, you're sticking back here with me. Everyone else is going to the locker room. And at that point, you know what's happening. Hudson probably knows what's happening, and Marvin Lewis breaks the news to him, and Hudson just says, okay, thank you for the opportunity, sir. Keep me in mind, and that's it. You never really see any of these guys get upset. And that's a good thing. It's professional, and they're high-character guys, and that's how much respect they have for this coaching staff. So that's something that really sticks out to me. Unfortunately, these cuts were just a preview of what we're about to see when the team tries to cut down from 75 to 53 and has to make some very difficult decisions. So I don't really have anything more to add than that. Sean, how about we jump into the Cowboys recap?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get off the subject of these roster cuts, because we're going to have to start talking about them again real soon. This Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time is the deadline for all 32 NFL teams to be down to 53-man roster. So that will be coming soon enough. So let's talk some preseason football now. The Bengals took on the Dallas Cowboys in Jerry World this past week, in the third week of the preseason, losing 24-18. And certain things transpired. I guess one such thing would be a punt hitting the major scoreboard. I think it's only like the second time that's happened in there. But some Bengals shined, some Bengals struggled. So we'll give our thoughts here on what we took out of the third preseason game, also known as the dress rehearsal. And I'm going to start here with rookie running back Giovanni Bernard, who we were so very lucky to speak with on the last episode of our show. He was a great guy and a fantastic guest. Giovanni Bernard absolutely shined again. He rushed 6 times, gained 39 yards, which is good for a 6.5 yard per carry average, and included another short touchdown run, and also had 3 receptions for a total of 16 yards, once again flashing his versatility. And, I mean, this kid is absolutely as advertised. I think he is doing more right now than what I initially expected to see out of him when he was drafted with a 37th overall selection out of North Carolina. Obviously, he does need to clean up a couple of things, his pass protection being probably the largest of those deficits that he's dealing with right now. But I think that Giovanni Bernard is starting to show a lot of confidence in himself. I think he's gaining the trust of his teammates as well as quarterback Andy Dalton. And I think he's really making a very strong push towards more playing time, more reps on the field, whether it's in the backfield or split out as receiver. So I think that Giovanni Bernard is headed to have a slightly larger impact than I would have initially thought before the preseason began. So I just got to say he's impressive, and I think he's on his way to being a very good NFL running back. Chris, what was your take on Giovanni Bernard's performance against the Cowboys?
Yeah, you got it, man. I mean, that's about it in a nutshell. Giovanni Bernard is what we thought he was after he was drafted. He, is the running back the coaching staff was looking for. He can line out wide. He can be a good safety net in the flats or out really down the field, pretty far down the field if he absolutely has to be, and this is the weapon that Andy Dalton has needed to take the next step. The performance, like you said, 6.5 yards per carry, 3 receptions, it goes a long way in predicting, if you'll recall, Week 3 is when starters play the most. It goes a long way in predicting that he's going to see a lot of touches next season. It may not just be strictly carries, but he's going to see a lot of touches and a lot of targets, whether it's intended or not. What I want to focus on here is the man he's fighting with at the running back position for snaps, for carries, rather, BenJarvus Green-Ellis. Green-Ellis, 5 attempts for 5 yards, 1 yard per carry. The interesting thing here is Green-Ellis managed to have 6 yards on a 3rd and short with John Connor leading the way, blocking. But on his other remaining 4 carries, he had -4 yards. So Green-Ellis we know what Green-Ellis is. He's going to get what is blocked and never anything more. And sometimes he won't get what's blocked. And that's what he is. And that's fine for these short yardage situations. The stat line is awful, but that's not what is important here. What's important to me that really sticks out is that 6-yard burst with John Connor leading the way. I know we've had extensive conversations in the past about John Connor versus Orson Charles at fullback / hybrid, et cetera, et cetera. To me, Green-Ellis is going to need a strong lead blocker to make these short yardage conversions most of the time. And I think with how Green-Ellis struggled in Dallas at times without that lead block proves that this team is probably on the way to keeping a traditional fullback with John Connor. Sean, your thoughts on Green-Ellis' performance and maybe the potential of John Connor sticking around?
Yeah, Chris, you said it, and I liked that you brought John Connor into the conversation here because I really believe that you highlighted the importance of having a traditional fullback in this system. You know, he's not the sexy guy back there like Orson Charles who will catch balls out of the backfield and, you know, possibly be another security blanket for Andy Dalton and, you know, turn nothing into big games or whatever, you know, but he is consistent. You absolutely know what you're getting with John Connor. He's going to make those crucial blocks to help these running backs. You know, he's going to clear a path for these guys and allow them to get the necessary yards, especially on short yardage situations, which has been Green-Ellis' forte. I mean, that's what he's known for, having a nose for the end zone. Last year he converted 14 3rd-and-1 attempts, which led the NFL. You know, that's what Green-Ellis does best. And with John Connor leading the way, you know, I think it only improves, you know, Green-Ellis' chances of continuing his success in those situations. But as you said, Chris, that's pretty much what Green-Ellis is. You know, the famous Denny Green quote there, "We are who he thought he was," or I don't know, something like that, right? Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, though, with Green-Ellis is that he's the short yardage back. You know what you're going to get with him. He's not a home run threat. He's more of a plotter. You know, Giovanni Bernard is more of the you know, the versatile threat. But what I've seen out of Giovanni Bernard is his ability to create conversions in those short yardage situations as well. He's a great skill set of making himself real small and squeezing through tight windows between the line, and is able to kind of pick up those you know, those tough yards, as you know, we've seen him go for a couple of 1-yard touchdown runs now. So I'm wondering if this kind of keeps going on, if Giovanni Bernard starts to share some of the responsibilities with BenJarvus Green-Ellis as the short yardage back. And if that's the case, once Giovanni Bernard really picks up his ability to pass protect and he starts getting more of his fundamentals down in that area, we could see kind of a dramatic shift in the amount of touches that these running backs are receiving throughout the season. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what the coaching staff feels, or how the coaching staff feels about that situation. Speaking of the offensive side of the ball, still, obviously, we've got to talk a little bit here about Andy Dalton. He's had kind of a roller coaster preseason. He didn't start out very well against the Atlanta Falcons. He didn't play very much, but in his few attempts during that game, he wound up with a 59.8 passer rating, kind of leading us all to take a step back and think, okay, how good is this guy? How good is he going to be in 2013? Can he make the improvements necessary? And it looked as though he had those questions answered in the second game against the Titans, where he had a stellar performance, came out with a 113.7 passer rating, and looked to take leaps and bounds from the first preseason game. But then I don't want to say that he really regressed on the third preseason game. I mean, he did complete 12 passes out of 16 attempts, which is good for 75%. I mean, that's terrific right there. Also 113 yards. But the troubling thing for me was the interception that he threw, which inevitably dropped his quarterback rating to 68 on the game. And, it was another one of those interceptions where it was an ill-advised throw. I get the fact that he was under pressure during throw and the pass kind of came out as a wobbler, but he tried to force the ball down the middle to Mohamed Sanu, who was covered underneath by a Cowboys cornerback. And it was just an easy interception, and it kind of led to the question that you ask yourself is, what was Dalton thinking when he threw the ball? Because even if the ball came out clean, there was a very small chance for completion on that play. And those are the kind of plays that were head scratchers in 2012 that you hope that Dalton would clean up in 2013. But that's a little bit of a troublesome interception coming from, a game like that, because those are the kind of things that you really want to see him get rid of in an all-important third year as an NFL quarterback. Chris, what was your take on Dalton's interception?
Well, I've stressed all week, and I've been saying it for weeks, and you can back this up. I've been saying it on Twitter, in articles, et cetera, et cetera. Dalton's performance against Tennessee was not a good indicator of how the season was going to play out, because Tennessee is simply not a good team. And this is classic Andy Dalton. We've seen him in the past couple of years beat up on the bad teams, encounter a playoff caliber team, and have his issues. It's important to note that left tackle Andrew Whitworth has not been playing. But for Dalton to sit in that pocket, a little bit under pressure, stare down only one receiver, not make his reads, and throw the ball in Sanu's direction anyway with the corner in front of him did not make any sense. Another thing I want to highlight is, and I stole this, I will give credit to Joe Reed of the Cincinnati Enquirer, Andy Dalton this preseason is 0 for 5 on passes attempted longer than 15 yards. And so here we are again with Dalton struggling with deep accuracy, with strength, and really with pocket presence and decision-making. It's hard to say that the Cowboys game is a 100% perfect indicator of how next season is going to go, but this was highly expected in my mind. I knew this was coming. What fans have to understand is we know what Andy Dalton is. We have 6 years of tape on him now. He was a 4-year starter at TCU. He started the past 2 years in the NFL with Cincinnati. We know who he is. I'm not going to sit here and say that he cannot develop further, but after 6 years, you do start to wonder if these limitations are going to be improved upon. And not a great game. There's another game for him to get his reps if the team chooses to play him against Indy. And, we'll see how he does going into next season. But for me, this was par for the course and pretty much exactly what I expected. 12 of 16, high efficiency in this short yardage, intermediate passing game offense. But after that, and especially when he needs to make plays against the tough defenses, he's still struggling. Let's turn around here and get off of Dalton for a little while at least and talk about the defense. The defense had some unexpected issues that I can't even claim I saw coming. I don't know, Sean, we'll hear in a few minutes here if you could see this coming, but the secondary really struggled against Dallas in Week 3, and that's alarming because Week 3 is when all the starters play most of the game. It's an issue to see Des Bryant and Miles Austin just run wild on this secondary. Leon Hall has always struggled covering Miles Austin, whether it's in the slot or on the outside. Des Bryant, in my mind, is a top 3 receiver, So I'm not all that concerned that he got his. But overall, the secondary looked bad, and maybe worse than last year's unit. Dre Kirkpatrick, we'll touch on him in a little bit, but he was one of the big names getting torched. But it's important to note that he was not the only one having a bad game. There was not a corner on that roster that had a good game against Dallas. Sean, take it away with these defensive secondary woes, man.
Yeah, that was surprising for me to see, to tell you the truth. That unit, in my opinion anyway, was one of the stronger units really down the stretch of the 2012 season, and I kind of fully expected them to pick up where they left off in 2013. We know Leon Hall was a little slow starting the 2012 season because of the lingering Achilles injury, but by the end of 2013, he looked back to his old self. He was terrific, but he looked terrible. I mean, I really don't have a better word for it, but he was getting burned by Miles Austin and Des Bryant. And, it wasn't only Leon Hall. Like you mentioned, Dre Kirkpatrick, Terrence Newman. There wasn't a corner on the team, or actually a safety either. I mean, Taylor Mays was getting spun around. I mean, that's not a huge surprise, I guess. But really, the Bengals secondary as a whole really did not have an answer for the Dallas passing attack. I mean, Tony Romo looked like Troy Aikman. So it's a little concerning. Dallas, I don't want to take anything away from Dallas. I think they have a terrific aerial attack. They have a great combination of wide receivers, terrific tight end in Jason Witten, and I think Tony Romo, at least for the regular season, is a little underrated as a passer. So, they were against a very good unit, but the problem where that lies there is look at the Bengals' schedule coming up in 2013, facing Tom Brady, facing Aaron Rodgers, so early on in the season. If this is where the secondary is at right now in Cincinnati, it doesn't bode well for the start of the season, where the Bengals take on a very difficult 5-game stretch to open up. So that's one thing that is really going to need to be hammered down before the regular season gets underway. And unfortunately, we only have one more preseason game to go. The starters aren't really going to get much playing time. So we're not going to see many of these guys get more reps until week 1 of the regular season, which leaves me a little nervous for the Bengals in the secondary, because it's kind of a mystery if what we saw against Dallas was kind of a little bit of a fluke for a game, if the guys were just kind of off, or, have they kind of started to take a little bit of a step backward this year. So that's something to really keep an eye on as we move forward and as we go into week 1 of the regular season against what should be a very improved Chicago Bears offense with Mark Trestman at the helm. So let's talk about one of these cornerbacks in particular, and that would be second-round player, the former first-round draft pick, Dre Kirkpatrick. Of every member of the secondary, who all looked equally terrible, Dre Kirkpatrick probably had the worst game out of all of them. He led up a touchdown to Des Bryant. He was flagged for 2 pass interference penalties. A positive was he looked like he could shadow a wide receiver very well in man coverage. It wasn't that he was getting blown away and that a wide receiver was getting, 2, 3, 4 steps on him down the field. He was in very tight coverage throughout the entire time, but he seemed to lack ball skills and instincts. He didn't really seem to be able to get a grip on watching the wide receiver's eyes and, turning around to find the ball. And that's why he was getting beat at the point of attack, and that's why he was getting flagged for interference penalties. So, it's one thing to be able to shadow a receiver downfield, but it's another thing to have enough awareness to get your body turned around, to stay out of the way of the wide receiver, and to make a play on the ball, which he just simply wasn't doing. And that's really was a big thing that cost the secondary throughout the preseason game against the Cowboys. And, as we know, Dre Kirkpatrick has made a bid to try to secure a starting spot opposite Leon Hall to start the season, and I think he kind of regressed in that area right now. I think right now what we see are two clear-cut starters as Leon Hall and Terrence Newman, with Dre Kirkpatrick still needing to shore up some of the fundamentals to play outside cornerback at the NFL level. So I don't expect Dre Kirkpatrick really to be in there with the ones to start the season. I think he's really going to have to show a lot of improvement over the course of the first couple of weeks of the season in practices. And when he does get limited reps in games, if he does end up wanting to crack the starting lineup. Chris, what's your take on Kirkpatrick's performance against the Cowboys and how you think that translates into the coming year for him?
Yeah, I can't see him seeing the field as a starter really in any capacity for the duration of the year unless there's an injury. You have guys like Hall and Newman who are seasoned veterans. Even if they're struggling, there's a good chance they can turn it around. There's no need to put Kirkpatrick in their place, even in the slot. I can't see it. You know, it's one thing for him to be struggling as a rookie and to maybe make some schematic errors or things of that nature, but to have some genuine fundamental errors, that's highly unacceptable for a first-round pick, especially now that he had a chance to learn for pretty much an entire year for what should have been his rookie season from the sidelines. I think we're seeing a lot of overreactions from writers and fans alike about the bust label. It's probably one of the most premature things I've ever heard in my life, considering this kid last week, I think, was only the 5th game he's ever been in the NFL in his career. So we're a very long way away from the bust label, and it's hard to even say, well, he's the 4th cornerback on the roster, so he's a bust, when there's so much talent in front of him and experience in front of him. It's like any other position except maybe running back. A rookie's going to come in and just not have starting time on this team right now. And Kirkpatrick, even in his second year, essentially going into what is his rookie year, is no exception to that. So he's going to see a lot of time on special teams. The thought process being he needs to just get the game speed down, man, and he needs to stay healthy and stay on the field for that. Injury strike, he'll be in there, but boy, he will be a target because teams have this on film now. He'll be targeted more than Ray Malaluga in the passing game, and that's saying something. So now that we've finished our recap,
I got to tell you, man, I think we have a theme right now for the show. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we got a theme right now for the show for, the Cowboys recap and, how these players have been performing. This is the theme right here. But they're who we thought they were.
Okay.
Did that happen?
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay,
Did you get that?
It happened.
All right, it happened. All right.
Let's just add, we're not letting them off the hook either.
That's true. I'm not going to go ahead and find that clip, though, because I don't trust the performance of my old computer right here.
It is what we thought it was.
That's right.
So now that we've finished the recap and Cincinnati is essentially what we thought it is, let's look ahead to the future here and the 4th and final week of the preseason against the Colts. We have a great guest here now live with us to help us out.
Football fans, check out the official T-shirt apparel shop for Bengals Central Radio. Check out bigfrog.com/Cincinnati. That's bigfrog.com/Cincinnati. Big Frog offers 24-hour turnaround and no minimums. At Big Frog, you think it, we ink it. Also visit them at their fabulous store over at Anderson Town Center, 7426 Beachmont Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45255. Hoo-day!
We would now like to welcome the host of Colts Central Radio and writer for Bleacher Report, very own resident expert on all things Colts, Tyler Brooke. Tyler, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, guys. I've been doing some homework all day. Nice to get a break from Microsoft Excel and actually finally get to talk some football for once today.
That sounds good, man. We're glad we could give you a break, and we're glad that you're here to chat some Bengals and Colts preseason football with us today. And, although it's, not the most exciting preseason week, we are heading into the 4th and the final preseason game of the 2013 season. As we know that, this is more of a depth evaluation for the coaching staff more so than anything right now. And being that we're going to see some of the depth from the Indianapolis Colts this coming week. Who are some players maybe deeper down on the Colts roster that might intrigue us and we might want to keep track of during the game?
Well, one of the guys that's absolutely shined in training camp has been Griff Whalen, Andrew Luck's old teammate from back at Stanford. He was on the training camp squad last season, had a knee injury, had to sit out, and wasn't able to make the team. This year he's come back. He's looked really good. Oh, with the Levon Brazil suspension, there's a very good chance that he comes in, makes the squad, and actually gets a couple snaps during the season. On defense, a guy I was looking for is Josh Chapman. This is another guy. He was a draft pick last season. Had to sit out the whole season on IR. He's gained a lot of hype around in Indianapolis. A lot of people are expecting him to play a really big role on this defense. And he's not a starter currently on the depth chart. So you'll get to see a couple good snaps from him. Hopefully his knee holds up. He's a big guy down there in the middle.
Great stuff, Tyler. Let's broaden the scope a little bit now. Sean and I are going to be watching the game, obviously, to evaluate depth and see how this very talented and deep roster gets narrowed down from 75 to 53. So, we need to do that effectively. We need some insight on the competition in a more broad sense. Which areas are the Colts strongest in when it comes to depth right now?
I think the one right off the bat is the defensive line, like we were just talking about. They brought in they have a very nice blend of veterans and youth. They brought in guys like Abreu Franklin, Ricky Jean-Francois, Corey Redding's coming back from last season, having an all-right, decent up-and-down season. Then they have some nice guys back there. They got Montori Hughes, a draft pick from this year. They had Josh Chapman, like we talked about. They have Ricardo Matthews, Drake Nevis. I'm not sure all those guys make the squad, but right now that's looking like one of the deeper spots on the roster right now. So I'd look out for that. And if we're going to talk about a place that struggles, especially depth-wise, I'd have to go with the secondary because especially those cornerbacks, they brought in a couple undrafted guys they thought they were going to be good in Sheldon Price and Daxton Swanson, Alan Chapman, a couple other guys. And so far they've looked ugly in preseason games.
Well, that's actually pretty perfect when we talk about that in relation to the Bengals because having a very strong defensive line on the Colts is great because the Bengals are still searching for their depth on the offensive line. So that's a great matchup there. And the Colts secondary depth being a little weak is also kind of a blessing, I guess, for the Bengals in disguise because the Bengals backup quarterback competition is ugly right now. Josh Johnson and John Skelton are, I guess I use the term battling very loosely for the position as Andy Dalton's backup. It's not looking pretty. So maybe we'll start to see one of those guys try to break away in preseason game 4 against the Colts. Switching gears to the starters real quick, Andrew Luck is one of the most talked about players in the league these days. What are the chances we see him in action on Thursday? And if he does play, how long do you anticipate him to be on the field?
I think they've been talking. I believe he will be starting the game. I think they only get him like 1 or 2 series. Again, this is the final preseason game. Andrew Luck already knows this offense. It's Pep Hamilton coming in, his former offensive coordinator at Stanford. I've seen him a couple times at training camp. He seems fine with the playbook. I don't think they're trying to get too much work from these starters, especially Luck. They want to keep Luck above all else healthy.
Yeah, well, Tyler, the good news there is guys like Geno Atkins on the defensive line won't be in very long either. So I think health shouldn't be an issue as long as that offensive line can hold up. Well, yeah, the offensive line's a little bit of a concern right now because they have problems at depth on offensive line, too. The starters, we had Anthony Costanzo go down last week, which was a bit of a scare. And then the interior line with Samson Statelli and Mike McGlynn, those are 2 big question marks on this team right now. So, yeah, hopefully Andrew Luck doesn't get in trouble with that scary front 7 of the Bengals, but luckily he'll only be in there for a couple plays. Well, there you go. I mean, Bengals Central listeners now know a key matchup to watch there a little bit. So I'll help us to, moving forward here, broaden the scope once again. Indy finished 11-5 last year, grabbed a wild card playoff berth, just like Cincinnati. As you're looking toward next season here, what has been the Colts' biggest improvement over the offseason that will help them make that back-to-back playoff appearance? I think it's going to be making use of the weapons Andrew Luck has. Last year with Bruce Arians, it was a completely vertical passing game. There was no offensive protection. Andrew Luck basically ran around there like a chicken with his head cut off,
trying to make plays. His completion percentage was only 54.1%, and that's really concerning. But with the new offense, I think you're going to see a lot more shorter passes. Andrew Luck's completion percentage is going to get a lot nicer. I'm guessing somewhere in the 60s. And then I just think overall these weapons with T.Y. Hilton, Darius Hayward-Bay, Reggie Wayne, Kobe Fleener, Dwayne Allen, if they're both healthy, I think you're just going to see a lot of big plays made from this offense. This could be a top 10 offense this season.
There you go. That's quite a bold statement there coming from with a new offensive coordinator, but that's great. I mean, they certainly have all the tools to get it done. And I agree with you with the new offense instilled by Beth Hamilton. I mean, I think that's going to cut down on the interception rate for Andrew Luck as well, which he struggled with a little bit in 2012. So, yeah, good things look to be happening for the offensive side of the ball in Indianapolis right now. And to broaden things even further, I mean, obviously we've got to ask here because we've just been talking about two playoff teams from a year ago, and Chris and I discuss this all the time, but obviously we want to get your take on it as well now. Give us your idea of how you feel the AFC is going to shake out in 2013. Which 6 teams do you see still playing in January?
Oh, geez, 6 teams. The first thing I want to say is I think that the AFC is a lot weaker than the NFC this year. But if we're going to go with playoff teams, we're going to have one from each division. I'm going to go Patriots win the East. I honestly think the Bengals have a real shot to win the North. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on Bengals radio. But I think they have a lot of talent there. I'm one of the guys that buys into Andy Dalton. So I think they have a shot to go to the playoffs. I think they win the division. I like the Colts and Texans out of the AFC South. And then I'm going to go Denver and Kansas City. I think Kansas City turns it around worse and then into the playoffs. I think I like a lot of their pieces. They have an incredibly underrated defense, especially if you look at that on paper. I think that's a nice defense that not a lot of people are talking about right now.
I love that pick, Tyler. That's very interesting, and I know that our Bengals Central listeners will also love what you had to say about the AFC North and the Bengals. So kudos to you for making our listeners happy, even though that wasn't your intention. We want to thank you for taking the time to come on today, my man. Why don't you take this second here to let our listeners know where they can reach you on Twitter and where they can find your work.
Yeah, guys, I write for Bleacher Report and Stampede Blue. You can find me on either one of those websites. Feel free to follow me at T_BROOKEY. That's T Brookie. And that's about it. Thank you so much for having me on today, guys.
Very cool. Bengals Central's listeners, that was Tyler Brooke of Bleacher Report, Stampede Blue, and Colts Central Radio here on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. We highly recommend you give him a follow on Twitter and check out his work.
Football fans, check out the official T-shirt apparel shop for Bengals Central Radio. Check out BigFrog.com/Cincinnati. That's BigFrog.com/Cincinnati. Big Frog offers 24-hour turnaround and no minimums. At Big Frog, you think it, we ink it. Also visit them at their fabulous store over at Anderson Town Center, 7426 Beachmont Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45255. Hoo-day!
Well, we got some great insight there from Tyler regarding what we can expect this week from the Colts. It should be an interesting contest, really, between these two teams that seem poised to make a big run at the postseason this year, especially after we just got that great prediction coming from Tyler during the interview. Chris, let's keep trucking along here with what we see for the Bengals in the future.
Yeah, preseason week 4 is here against a very similar team in how last year ended. And, preseason, the final week isn't going to see a lot of starter play, and that's fine. What we really need to focus on here is what to expect from the Bengals. And I think what you're going to see is a few drives from Dalton and the offense. But what they're really going to be doing is mixing up the offensive line, throwing these versatile guys around. I think last week was when we saw a guy like Mike Pollock at center. We're going to see some trial and error along the line. We're going to see the quarterback battle just go nuts. I think they're going to interchange time here between Josh Johnson and John Skelton. There were some extreme overreactions last week with Skelton not getting any playing time and folks saying, well, that's the writing on the wall. Well, no, it's not. It was the third preseason game, and the starters took up most of the snaps, so all the quarterbacks couldn't get in the game. Skelton's still on the roster for a reason, and that's one of the major things to watch. On defense, you're going to see Kirkpatrick just on the field for probably another 60 snaps, and we'll see if he is improved or not. He's not going to be going against as good competition. But other than that, we're going to see a lot of mixing and matching in the linebackers, roles as those things happen, and we'll see some more hybrid defenses and some experimentation as this team tries to figure out how in the world it's going to cut down to 53, but nothing too ridiculous. I don't think we're going to see anything that we haven't seen yet. We're going to see these guys trying to get more film on these players to make these cuts. Sean, what are your expectations headed into the sometimes boring for fans preseason game 4?
Well, you said it, Chris. I mean, to tell you the truth, my expectations are pretty much outlined by what you had just said right there. Just to throw a couple of player names out there, really, I guess, it's, like you said, it's about getting tape on these guys. I think we're going to see Dante Moak get a lot of reps at defensive end, as well as the Quinn Evans. I think the Bengals really want to see more of these guys and see what they can do coming off the edge. I think we're also going to see a lot of Jason DeMach at the linebacker position. The coaching staff seem very impressed by him, but as we've seen time and time again, they kind of want to see him get his motor going earlier and keep it going throughout the game, so I expect him to get a lot of reps. And finally, the final position in the battle for backup running backs and backup wide receivers is nowhere near settled. So I think we're going to see a lot of Kobe Hamilton. We're going to see a lot of Dane Sonsenbacher, a lot of Ryan Whalen. On the running back side, we'll see a good amount of Cedric Pierman, Dan Herron, and Rex Burkhead, because when you look at it really, in each of those two position groups, there's probably one or two spots available for each of those three guys. So, some of the, roster battles, I mean, a lot of them actually will be either won or lost, I believe, during this preseason game. So if you pay close enough attention to some of the players at those positions, you might be able to actually witness these roster battles, being won or lost live as we watch this game on Thursday night. And speaking of positions as a whole and not, just naming players really, I mean, there's a couple of them that really need to show more consistency as far as depth goes, heading into the regular season. I mean, obviously, depth is a luxury, but it's also a necessity at the same time on a football team. And, I mean, I know that sounds like a very contradicting statement, but the reasoning is, obviously, you don't want to have to use depth in the regular season. You want your starters to be able to stay out there on the field and, and play a full game. But at the same time, things happen throughout the regular season. Minor injuries, major injuries, substitutions. There's going to be times where the deeper guys on the roster are really going to have to go out and take the field during the regular season, and a slip-up could, be the cost of a game at times. So some of the positions really that need to show more consistency, I mean, obviously, Chris, you already highlighted the backup quarterback position. We need to see somebody emerge there. I mean, somebody has to take the reins and say, I'm going to win this job and back up Andy Dalton for the year. Another is the offensive line. The offensive line play has been shaky from the starters all the way through. And, so some guys really need to step up, not only showing versatility, but also showing that they can be stable at the position where they are right now, because as we've seen already this preseason, Andrew Whitworth's been out, Andre Smith is a little nipped up right now, Trevor Robinson was injured for a while, Kyle Cook was last year. Injuries happen quite frequently to those big guys in the trenches, so you really need a good solid offensive line depth going into the regular season, so we really need to watch for those guys coming up in week 4 of the preseason when we're going to see most of them in action. Chris, what position group do you think needs to show more consistency coming up this week?
Well, you stole mine. I need to see the offensive line. We're already seeing the offensive line have some serious issues as far as health goes. Whitworth has yet to play, and that's not an issue. He knows what he's doing, et cetera, but it almost seems like a nagging thing that could keep him out of the opener and maybe beyond, and it seems like something that he could re-injure. Andre Smith got hurt last game. He's fine for the opener, but we've seen him have his nagging injuries in the past. We don't know how the guys on the interior are going to hold up. You never know when a 300-pound lineman is going to roll up on another one's leg, and that's it for the year. So for me, I need to see stuff from really, especially rookies. I need to see T.J. Johnson. I need to see Reed Fraggle. I need to see, things like that. I need to see interchangeable pieces. I need to see that depth play well, especially if they're not going against first-team defenders. Play well, get a good push off the ball, get some space for the rookie running backs and things of that nature. And really, I need to see more from Anthony Collins as well, because he was getting abused against Dallas. And to be fair, he was going against a guy like DeMarcus Ware, but he was, for a guy who is praised so often and rightfully so as being a very, very good backup swing tackle, I need to see more, and he's going to have his chance for at least a little bit to show that he's gotten it together. I wouldn't say that his roster spot's in any kind of danger, but I guess you never know if he puts together another horrible performance. Let's go ahead and narrow this down here and focus on one player, Sean, that we're keeping an eye on here. For me, I want to see Sean Prater, and I know that's kind of out of left field, but Sean Prater, to me, is a guy in the defensive secondary who is fighting for his roster spot right now with guys like Chris Lewis-Harris. And I think he's going to make the final roster, and I say that because I think he's versatile enough to see snaps at safety as well. I really like what Chris Lewis-Harris has done, but he's a little too small to come in at safety. We've seen historically the Bengals love defensive backs that deep on the depth chart that can play both spots. So for me, his versatility in that regard is something that could prevent him from slipping to the practice squad and maybe keep him on the final roster. So I want to see how he does, and even more importantly, I want to see how the coaching staff uses him, because if they use him at safety and he does well, that's going to make him much, much more attractive than the other, 3 or 4 guys fighting for that last 5th or 6th spot at cornerback. So, Sean, who is your one player you're dialed in on here going into Indianapolis?
Well, I'm going to flip it to the offensive side of the ball, and I'm going to say rookie running back Rex Burkhead. He's a guy that we haven't really seen much of at all, really, in the preseason this year. And he's in a scrum right now with Cedric Pierman and Dan Herron to make the roster as a running back. And quite frankly, I know exactly what the Bengals are going to get out of Cedric Pierman. I know enough at this point about Dan Herron, but there's a big question mark over Rex Burkhead right now. The kid gets a lot of praise from people who watched him play in Nebraska, and apparently a lot of these Nebraska fans obviously feel like he's the best thing since sliced bread. But I have absolutely no idea what his production levels are going to be in the NFL. So I need to see more of Rex Burkhead in week 4 of the preseason to either, make a believer of me and say, hey, maybe you can leapfrog one of these guys and stick on the team, or, so I can make a decision and say, you know what, the Bengals would be better off sticking with, what they know they have and maybe try to squeeze him onto the practice squad. So, that's one guy that I'm going to be looking for in the upcoming week. We'll see what happens, I guess.
So let's get some fan involvement going here and start our weekly Bengals mailbag segment. We have our first question from Jeremy Sickle, and you can find him on Twitter at the same name. And he wants to know what the workload is going to be between Ben Jarvis Green-Ellis and Giovanni Bernard. And that's something that we've been asked a lot, and rightfully so, as that continues to evolve. For me, it's going to be a 60-40 split in terms of carries as a traditional running back. Ben Jarvis Green-Ellis is still the starter. He's not going to put up 1,000 yards again, but he's going to see the majority as the veteran who does not fumble and as the guy who can take that kind of wear and tear throughout the entire season and still have enough in the tank for a potential postseason run. What I do think is going to happen is Giovanni Bernard is going to get more touches, meaning he's going to be a second running back in the backfield. He's going to catch a pass. He's going to be lined up at wide receiver. He's going to catch a pass. He'll be in on passing plays, maybe to block and still split out and catch a pass. Green Ellis isn't going to catch any passes. If he does, it'll be minimal. If he can actually reel them in and make a difference after the catch, I think Green Ellis is going to win the carries split 60-40, but Bernard is going to far and away have more touches. Sean?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Chris. I actually just put out an article yesterday on Bleacher Report really highlighting the exact same thing, is that I too think that Green Ellis gets the carry split in a 60-40 ratio in Green Ellis' favor. But like you said, Bernard should end up getting more touches as the season progresses because of his versatility as a receiving threat out of the backfield or being able to be split out wide as a receiver. And as Giovanni Bernard improves in his pass protection abilities, the Bengals will be more comfortable with giving him more reps in the backfield as well, which should help increase his touches also. So, yeah, I think if you look at it as far as total touches or maybe even total snaps at the end of the season, I think we might actually see more from Giovanni Bernard than Jarvis Green Ellis. So moving on, we've got a question here from our buddy Gutter Snake. He's at Twitter at Gutter Snake. He's our buddy that writes for Stripe Hype, the Bengals blog. Be sure to check out his stuff there. And he asks, are there any players that have been released earlier this week being considered for the practice squad, or do we think that they're just gone and out of here? I think there might be a couple of players that the Bengals would consider for the practice squad. Jordan Campbell is still a fascinating guy. Obviously, the coaches had some praise for him as he was being cut on Hard Knocks. They felt that he could play in the league. So I think he would be one name that is a possibility of being brought back if he does clear, waivers and it's time to, create the practice squad. You could also look at a guy like Tyrone Gord, or really any of the wide receivers that are really deep on the chart. I think that's always a position that the Bengals look at, stashing a guy or two on the practice squad. It's one of those positions where you can really never have enough in terms of depth. I think those are a couple of the guys that I would look for that have been recently cut that might be able to swing back around on the Bengals practice squad for the 2013 season. How about you, Chris? What do you think on the practice squad situation there?
I think the only legitimate one is Jordan Campbell, just because of his potential. And really, like the coaching staff was telling him, as we saw on Hard Knocks, he's not on the roster purely because it's so deep right now at linebacker. And I don't think that he's going to stick on the Cincinnati practice squad. I think he has a chance to make an actual roster somewhere as a backup. He's pretty talented. I wasn't as high on him as some were. I prefer Jason DeMonch myself, but I think the potential there is so intriguing. And I also think the coaching staff wasn't exaggerating or BSing when they told Boyd, the receiver they signed because A.J. Green got hurt, who I cannot pronounce his first name. I don't think they were exaggerating when they said they were going to try to put him on the practice squad. I really do. His speed is incredible. And as I've said in the past on the show, when they look at that 5th and 6th wide receiver spot, it has to have speed. I mean, it can't just be a possession guy. It has to have speed and be able to contribute on special teams. So I think you could see him thrown on there and develop for a year or two and have him compete for that 5th or 6th roster spot in the coming years here. Those are my two as of right now. I don't know if Otis Hudson is eligible again, but I would bet they'd try to bring him back as well. We have another question from one of our friends, Mr. Sean McMahon. You can find him on Twitter at Wolf, Kaosaun, and he wants to know, does Dante Moak have a chance to make the 53? I say no. I say no because the injury history is just overwhelming, and I don't think that's going to change. He had some okay snaps against Dallas, and that's fine. I think the depth is way too much. I think more depth and roster spots like that are reserved for more versatile and consistent players, and they also need those kind of roster spots in the defensive secondary for purely because of how badly the cornerback position especially has been hit with injuries in the past few seasons. I think they've learned their lesson. I think if I read one of Reedy's articles right, Moak is eligible for the practice squad. I would much rather see him down there than on the 53. I think there's a chance to make the 53. I can't see it happening unless he has a monster game or injuries occur, which we know they can and will. Sean, Dante Moak's shot at the 53.
I'm with you, Chris. It's unfortunate, but it's slim to none for Moak. I've always liked the intrigue in Moak from the Bengals. You know, I mean, he's a freakish athlete. His speed for his size is unbelievable, and I really love his transition to the defensive end position. I think he's much better suited for it than he was initially at linebacker. But it's a numbers game right now, and if you want to keep Moak on the roster, you're looking at keeping 10 defensive linemen, which is a hefty amount of defensive linemen to keep on the final 53. Because really, you're looking at keeping 4 defensive tackles, and he would be the 6th defensive end. I believe the drafting of Margus Hunt was the writing on the wall there. You know, he's kind of the freak pass rusher of the future. Dante Moak is unfortunate enough, but he is falling by the wayside. Chris, if you're correct there with the practice squad eligibility, I think that would be perfect for him. But it would also be a little concerning, I guess, because of his injury history with his migraines and everything. You never know when things like that are going to strike again. And, ultimately, I think it could end up really sealing his fate in this circumstance. So that's a no for me on Dante Moak making the roster. Our next question here is from Kentucky Dude, and you can find him on Twitter at JHNN Sports. And he asks, does Andrew Whitworth start against the Bears in the Week 1 opener? Right now, it looks good. I think it's promising. It's something to keep an eye on, though, because it's not a sure thing yet, because at this point is really you're looking for setbacks, and he's already had a little bit of setbacks. I mean, he should have been back, being able to take the field with the rest of the team by now, but his recovery has been a little slower than expected. So that's a little worrisome. He's still in line to potentially be able to start the regular season, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. He's going to be questionable going into Week 1. And, right now, really, I think it's kind of a 50-50 shot that he plays in Week 1. It's really all a matter of how his knee responds to the treatment and physical therapy going on over the next 2 weeks. Chris, what are your thoughts on Whitworth starting in Week 1?
I don't know, man. I like what you said, but at the same time, Andrew Whitworth is a bad man, and I can't see him missing the team's opener. He's one of those guys that are going to tell the doctors to, maybe not as politely, but he'll tell them to go away, and he'll be on the field. He needs to protect his quarterback. That's what he does. This strikes me as more of a precaution thing. The Bengals don't need him in there in the preseason. This is like Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez didn't even show up to training camps, and no one said a word. And so Whitworth taking an extra couple of weeks to make sure he's 100%, that's fine with me. And I can't see him missing unless that leg is amputated. He's going to put a brace on, and he'll be out there to protect Andy Dalton. That is his number one desire. You saw it last year against Oakland when that fight happened. Whitworth took a dude's head off when Dalton got hit late. He's not going to let another guy step in and allow that to happen. Whitworth is quietly the heart and soul of that offense in terms of leadership, and I cannot see him missing an opener on the road for what I am understanding as a pretty minor issue right now. Our final question comes from Joe Fleesner, and I apologize if I butchered that. I have a bad habit of doing that. You can find Joe on Twitter at Joe_FLEISSNER. That's why I don't know how to say that, Joe, and I apologize. He wants to know, why hasn't there been much talk of outside linebacker Emmanuel Lemur throughout camp? It's actually a really good question because there hasn't been much said about Lemur. My answer is rather basic, and I apologize I can't go into more detail, but it's because he's doing his job and he's doing it well. Lemur has had no setbacks. He is the number one depth option on the chart behind James Harrison at strong side and Vontaze Burfict on weak side. And unfortunately, he does not have a chance to beat out Harrison for a starting position. He doesn't have a chance to beat out Burfict for a starting position, obviously. And he sure as heck isn't going to play in the middle at only 230 pounds, as much as some will try to tell you he will. Lemur is an amazing depth option. Think of him kind of like Brandon Johnson in years past. He's going to be that great depth option unless there's an injury, and then he's going to be on the field starting. Lemur is going to be on the field a decent amount in nickel situations and things like that because Harrison and probably Malaluga, I would bet, are still going to come off the field a good amount in those types of situations, if I had to guess, because Lemur excels in coverage. So he's not technically the starter, but he's going to see a lot of snaps in my mind, and even on special teams. There's just not a lot of talk because he's not a high-profile guy. And really, Joe, the fact that you even asked about him is very, very impressive because not a lot of fans are in the know when it comes to Lemur right now. You know, undrafted rookie, quietly had an amazing season last year. He is like the other linebackers. Behind the starters, though, there's just way too much talent along the starting line for him to break through right now, and that's why you're not really hearing a lot. Sean, thoughts on Emmanuel Lemur's lack of talk?
Yeah, you know, that's pretty much it. You summed it up, man. I'm not really sure what else I can really add to that because it is what it is right now. He's behind some very talented linebackers. And, you know, Ray Malaluga's playing better. He's actually having a great preseason. He's not moving out of the middle. They brought James Harrison in to be the strong side guy. Vontaze Burfict is, just an amazing specimen of a linebacker, and he's solidified on the weak side. So, yeah, Lemur is just a very, very solid backup at this point, and that's really all he is. He has no shot of breaking that starting lineup. He might see some action, Chris, as you said, in substitution packages and things like that, but, you know, he's just a good guy to have as far as depth goes, and that's really as far as it goes with Emmanuel Lemur. You haven't been hearing about him not because he hasn't been doing well, but because he has been doing well. He's done a good job. He's done what he's supposed to do, and he'll make the roster again this year just like he did last year. And that's it for Emmanuel Lemur. He'll be on the Bengals 53.
Yeah, no press is good press sometimes. And Bengals Central's listeners, that'll do it for our Twitter mailbag segment. We hope our answers, were everything you were hoping for and more. Feel free to give us a follow on Twitter at BengalsCentral and ask us your questions throughout the week, and we will answer them live on the show.
Absolutely. Also, remember to check out our sponsors, onit.com. Type onit.com/footballradio in your address bar to receive 10% off your next purchase courtesy of Bengals Central. Also, check out Big Frog T-shirts at bigfrog.com/Cincinnati. They're kind enough to make our very awesome Bengals Central T-shirts for us. So stay tuned because coming soon we'll probably have another contest that you can have a shot at winning your very own Bengals Central T-shirt. We'd like to thank everyone for tuning in this week. A very special thank you goes out to Tyler Brooke of Bleacher Report and co-host of Colts Central Radio right here on Pro Football Central Radio Network. As always, be sure to scour the ProFootballCentral.com network for all of the latest news for every NFL team. For Chris Rawling, I'm Sean O'Donnell. Hooday.
The following podcast is a part of the Pro Football Central Podcast Network. Check us out at ProFootballCentral.com.
Tonight's back in the orange and black. See the natty on the mat, baby, tell me where you at. In the jungle, who they bringing it back to the jungle. And the game day, yeah, the jungle's back. Got the natty pack in the orange and black. We're stacked to the track, so I'm back behind long work, chugging down cases. And a can brewed in '88. Who they? Super rumble, spirit of the icky shuffle. Feel it rumble through the king of the jungle. Thunderous roar, he will soar across the river to the Newport shore. The Fountain Square, the great American ballpark. Down at the banks above the riverfront graveyard. The Paul Brown Stadium, the Nat is awakened. They were making a statement to the rest of the nation. Cincinnati's back in the orange and black. See the natty on the map, baby, tell me where you at.